thank you so much, Amy. Appreciate it. And hello, everyone. We're excited to spend this time with you today, and we'll get things kicked off. A little bit of an introduction. My name is Jeff Hensel. I'm a senior manager at Eide Bailey. I've been here for some time. Prior to joining Eide Bailey, I spent over 20 years at Microsoft Corporation. And through a number of different roles, product development, Microsoft consulting, and digital transformation. And then I also spent the better part of 2 years in the state of North Dakota as their chief customer success officer. So I've got some kind of a varied and interesting background, and my role at Eide Bailey is really around helping clients create their digital future through technology. So that's a little bit about me. I'm joined by John, and John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Jeff. My name is John Steinhauer. Like Jeff, I am formerly of Microsoft as well. Most recently, I work with the Microsoft Technology for Social Impact team, which focuses just on nonprofits. My role there was helping nonprofits learn more about Microsoft technology and how to envision and move through the roadmaps and to move to the cloud to help their missions, as well as help them save money where they can actually use that money that they save for the people that they serve. So I'm glad to be here with Eide Bailey, and I'm looking forward to helping our clients as well. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So what are we going to talk about today? So I think there's a handful of things that are really relevant to every organization, but also particularly interesting and important to nonprofits. And the first thing we'll cover is why would you care about technology as a nonprofit? You may already have a great answer for that, but we will spend some time unpacking that briefly. Then we're going to pivot to the key trends that we see relative to the nonprofit area and sector, but also business in general, because they are not they're not mutually exclusive. People's experiences in one place definitely impact how they expect and want things in other parts of their life. We'll spend some time talking about technologies that we know can benefit you as a client, or a prospect in our organization, or in your role. It's serving your mission, and then we'll pivot a little bit around things you should consider around the right tools, and then lastly we'll talk about some modern offerings that we're aware of that can really help. We believe can help you from both an impact on your mission, but also from a business value standpoint. So that's what we'll spend time talking about today. So the first thing that I think is really important to talk about is the fact that every organization, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit organization or a government entity, is or will become a digital organization. Technology is pervasive. It's disruptive, it's creating change. And you need to be able to react to that, both in the case of the nonprofit sector, it's really around how do you best serve your employees, your volunteers, your donors, and whoever's receiving the services that you provide. And at the end of the day, that's a critically important thing to think about, because as I mentioned earlier, it's an expectation, but it's also something that is going to allow you to be as effective as you can. The second thing to think about is really around attracting and retaining donors, employees, and volunteers across your organization. So having the right tools to be successful, having the right tools to have the right data, having the right tools to do the marketing and communication the right way is really critical. And then the last piece is about security. So everybody's familiar with some of the challenges over the last many years on cyber threats, cybersecurity, breaches, costs to organizations, and frankly, the fact that some organizations have gone out of business or have stopped being able to serve because of the fact that they've been breached. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So those are key reasons that you really need to think about a digital future. It's reasons you need to think about your current situation from an organizational standpoint. And so we'll spend some time talking about those as we go forward here over the next hour. So key trends that we're seeing fall into 4 buckets. These are not the only trends that we're seeing, but these are probably the primary ones. The first one is really around recruitment and retention. When it comes to communication, collaboration, productivity, and how you think about getting the right people to support your mission, recruitment and retention can be a differentiator. And so we'll spend some time talking about that, and we'll talk about the trends there. Donor engagement. How do you make sure that you are providing the right content to the right audience to maximize the opportunity that you have from a funding standpoint as an organization going forward? Data as an asset is one that is not exclusive to nonprofit, but we'll talk about that for a bit, and just really how do you use your data, the data that you have or the data that you can access, to be as effective as you can. And then the last one is really around how do you protect that. So we talked a bit about cyber security, and security is a critical aspect of how you think about technology a moment ago, and we'll spend more time on that. So some of the trends that we see very clearly. The first one, and there are a lot of words on the slide, and you'll get the content, but one of the things that we see is the world has changed in the last 3 years, but it's really a factor of things that have been happening over the last 10 to 15 years as technology has enabled more remote working, hybrid working options. And so today, whether you're looking for somebody to come and work for you as a full-time employee, or somebody to come and volunteer for your organization, or somebody to engage with you, the reality is they want flexibility, and they want to be able to do it in some cases on their time, with the information that they need to be successful and to help your organization be successful. And so there are some great studies out there. For example, there's the Microsoft 2020 Work Trend Index notes that one of the bullet points in there is 70% of individuals in Generation Z are really considering additional income. They're thinking about how did they do things differently. They're thinking about changing jobs. It's a very fluid world, and frankly, technology is driving a lot of that. And so that's driven through, the desire to have a better work-life balance. It's driven through the idea that they don't want to commute the way they might have in the past. And it's driven through really just having sort of similar experiences, whether they're in person or participating and having impact in a remote way. And so that's one thing that needs to be considered, is expectations have changed. The second piece of that is really around how do you think about a wider pool of talent and skills? So some organizations may struggle filling a specific role based on today's labor market. But what if you could get that talent in a different labor market that actually was very effective, but they just needed the right tools to make that happen? And so understanding how you think about your organization relative to both in person and hybrid or remote working is something that has to be considered by every organization of all sizes. And then the last piece is, how do you deliver an expectation today that's really around skilling and then empowering them for more, to be have as much impact as possible. And so individuals really want to have impact. They want to have impact at work. They want to have impact if they're volunteering. And so how do you enable that in a way that's meaningful and empowers them to do it in a situation that allows them to be as effective as possible with flexibility. So recruiting the right employees and talent is a piece. The second piece is really, to me, around engagement. And so one of the things, this is the second key trend. So engagement, if you look at what's happening, one of the websites, the website nonprofitpro.com talks about a depersonalizing donor experiences. And so understanding how you connect with donors in ways beyond your traditional channels, making it more personal, making it easier for them to understand impact, making it easier for them to do, sort of the things that they want to do relative to their engagement with your organization and your mission becomes really, really critical. And it's also something that's becoming expected for individuals. So today's world of technology has shifted the mindset and paradigm of many individuals in terms of, well, I can do this on Amazon, or I can do this on YouTube. Why can't I do it with other organizations? It just seems like it should work. Right or wrong, it's something that needs to be considered. And I think the other thing I would just say is that engagement is really around thinking about how do you do both self-service as well as other communication mechanisms with your donors. A second piece of engagement that we see a lot is really around how do you do memorable, actionable content, again, delivered through various channels in a collaborative way that drives results. And so in today's world, there are likely, various channels that you deliver content. There's likely various channels that you deliver messages to your end user base. And the reality is that there are ways that you can consolidate that and make sure that you're doing the right thing in a consistent way with a consistent message. And that we see is becoming more and more important. And then the last one I would say is making it easy. So whether it's a donor or, as I mentioned earlier, around employees and volunteers, it's about making it easy. So how do you make it as easy as possible to not just do a donation, but to understand the relationship with your organization? So those are the first two key trends that we see. A third one is around data. And so there's a lot of great quotes out there now. Data is the new gold, data is the new oil. The reality is that the data that your organization has around the services you provide, as well as the way you provide those services and the funding sources you have, that really is critically important to your organization. So having that full view of your services and the full life cycle means you're going to make better decisions for the future. So oftentimes that means consolidating data from multiple systems. It means thinking about how do you get data from donor portals and financials and multiple other systems of record. And so that becomes a critical thing that needs to be considered and factored into a long-term strategy. And then I think the third piece is really around how do you share that data? How do you share that data with individuals where it can be impactful, where they can take action, and it can be through a experience that they're familiar with? Because you don't want to send things out that then they have to go figure out how to log in and click 14 times and find the information they need. You want to be able to share it in a meaningful way. So using data is is absolutely something that needs to be front and center. The last one, and I'll spend more time talking about this as we go forward, but the protecting your investments is something that has to be part and parcel to everything that you do. So how do you think about the challenges that organizations are having? One of the most important things to understand is that cyber criminals over the last 3 years, particularly since the 2020, the spring of 2020, with the beginning of the pandemic, they're moving away from large organizations, and they're calling it softer targets. And those are their words, not mine. But they are looking at how do we find the path of least resistance to financial data of individuals. And so we'll talk more about that in a bit. And then the last one is beyond cyber. It's really around compliance across the full life cycle of your organization. How do you protect the data that you own as an organization? And how do you think about it in a way that really makes sure that you're a good steward of that data for not just yourself, but for everybody involved, whether that's the service recipients, the donors, et cetera, because that's really one of the biggest risks from a cyber standpoint relative to a nonprofit organization. So with that, I'm going to pivot to some capabilities. The capabilities will mimic the things that we talked about. We'll talk about things that you can do as an organization around recruitment and retention, donor engagement, data as an asset, and protecting your investments. And I think the great news is, and again, I spent 20 years with Microsoft Corporation, so I'll spend a lot of time talking about the tools that we know about from Microsoft. But these patterns are the same. But I think that there's a lot of opportunity for organizations to actually use some of the tools they may already be paying for in their environment. So the first one, as we look at recruitment and retention. So again, the fact is people expect flexibility. It doesn't matter if they're an employee or a volunteer. They want some flexibility in how they can serve and support. And then at the end of the day, there are also ways that you can help people feel connected. And it goes beyond just the idea that you have required office hours or things like that. It's about being intentional about it. So in some ways, this is a technology and a process conversation, because if you look at the statistics, individuals who have started working from home and really enjoy it, the reason they are compelled to go back into a physical setting is about human connection, which I think is very personal to a nonprofit audience such as yourselves. They want to be there to be connected. They want to have that time be meaningful. And then all of the rest of the time, whether it's administrative or training or things like that, they want that to have flexibility. And so the point is their engagement with people needs to be meaningful, and it needs to be planful. And so there are ways and strategies that you can put together around that, but it's something that today is really becoming expected. And so, how do you do that? You do that through the right technology set. You do that through tools that allow you to be productive and are well known wherever you are. You do it through a consistent user experience. So whether they're running late to pick up a child from daycare or whatever, they can take a phone call. They can do the things that they need to do from a productivity standpoint. So Microsoft Office is a great set of tools for that. I think that if you look deeper into that, the reality is that once you have that opportunity to just do the basics, you also have the opportunity to go in a much richer collaboration mode with collaborating with documents in real time, having again, a consistent experience around video, voice, and chat. Understanding how you feel connected, whether you're actually in a meeting or you might have to miss it, but yet still can have the transcript, you can have the meeting notes, you can have any documents that were shared and links. So having those pieces of the puzzle to allow people to feel connected, even if they're not, becomes a really powerful tool. And then I think there are other components to think about that are super important, which is how do you help people feel connected when they're not physically there? So how do you make sure that they have the ability to have personal conversations or provide praise to individuals, both publicly and privately? And then all of that with components that allow an individual to have a healthy boundary set relative to when they're available and when they're not available. So today's world is different relative to expectations. And whether that's an employee or a volunteer, there are great tools that are available to support that. So I'm going to pivot briefly to donor engagement. So I see this as context and connections. And I mentioned earlier, donor engagement is about making it personal, and it's about making sure it's a consistent set of messages that are personal to them versus the broad brush stroke of send all content out to everybody, whether it's an email or a physical US mailing or webinar, et cetera. So how do you think about that relative to those donors having an understanding of who they are, and then really making sure you're using the right channel to approach them? So having the right tools to do that is a really great tool in your toolbox. I think the second thing that I would talk about is through those personal experiences, those personalized experiences, how do you do that in a way that makes it feel truly personal? How do you have smaller group conversations with donors? How do you think about making sure you can do that in a secure way so that they can share information and you can share targeted information to them relative to the impact that they're having on your mission? And then I think the third piece of that is this is really at the end of the day is a two-way street, and it goes back to expectations. So donors have the same type of expectations that an employee or a volunteer might have. Their expectation is, I can do this at website X, why can't I do it within this organization? And the reality is that you need to be thinking about how do you do both a push motion of here's the information we think you want, or we know you want, or can you support our mission, versus how can they go search for themselves? How can they find out? And so I think there are ways that you can look at it as a long-term strategy of thinking about what we call low code, no code, meaning more less technical people can do that work in an environment. And how do you do that in a way that actually complements what you're already trying to do? So that's donor engagement. The third thing that we see around opportunities is, again, data. And so unlocking insights becomes one of the most powerful things that you can do. It allows you to make better decisions around the rest of technology, around the rest of your strategy and things that you want to do to have the greatest impact. And so if you look at that, getting data from multiple sources is really an amazing opportunity. If you're not doing it already, understanding how you consolidate that data, how you do it in a way that allows you to uncover insights and trends and opportunities, that can be a difference maker for your organization. So I think that's one of the things that is absolutely critical. Power BI from Microsoft is a great tool for that. It's quite user-friendly. Everybody knows how Excel works for the most part. And then how do you share that out through things like Teams and other capabilities is really a powerful set of capabilities. I talked about Power BI, centralizing that. So having one source of the truth, one set of content that you're looking at versus having multiple people use Excel and email it around. We see that all the time. And it's not only usually inaccurate, but quite ineffective. And then the last one is, how do you share that externally? How do you share that data that you have in a meaningful way that's also considers privacy, but does it in a way that allows you to maximize the mission of your organization? So do that based on audience, do it based on a donor or volunteer or employee, and tell the story that creates the greatest impact for your organization. That's the power, one of the most powerful things around harnessing the data that you have or can access and using it in the right way. So the last piece we'll spend a little bit more time on, and many of you may have already seen a lot of content on this, but we're going to spend time talking about security and the importance of it to the nonprofit organizations that we serve. And so if you look broadly, the cyber criminals around the world have become very effective at finding the right attack surfaces, the right attack surfaces for the right sized client to be most effective. Sadly, they use data very well. And so what you're seeing is that data breaches are on the rise. 54% have experienced a cyber attack in the last 12 months. And the truth of the matter is that many of the clients we talk to and we ask, have you had a cyber attack? And they say no. The question you then ask is, how do you know? And so we'll cover that bullet in just a second here. So again, cyber attacks are on the rise. Part of the challenge that you have is that need and demand for doing remote work. And so having more endpoints, more devices creates a risk. And so the cost of breaches has gone up significantly. But to my point earlier, what we're seeing around most cyber criminals is they don't just get in and then do their thing. They get into an environment and they'll sit there. They'll sit there for 6 months or more. In fact, on average, it's 286 days just to identify and contain it. But the reality is that cyber criminals will sit in your environment after they've breached it for a long time before they will actually take action. And so they need to feel like they're really in. And that's a scary thing. And it's expensive. As you can see on the bottom, the cost per breach is up significantly. The cost per record on a breach, and a lot of that comes from healthcare and education, but it's also very expensive. Healthcare and education are the top two targeted industries for cyber attacks. My point earlier around air quotes soft targets is this is the type of organization, healthcare, education, nonprofits, not a stretch. They're looking for how do they find data on donors and other things that they can actually leverage to take advantage of the resources you have. So this isn't about trying to create scare tactics. It's just, these are facts. This is data. This is a reality. And if you're not thinking about cybersecurity, you absolutely should be. So there's also some other considerations to think about relative to cybersecurity. One of them is, do you desire to bring your own device for employees or for volunteers? That's not a bad thing. It's just something you need to consider as part of your overall strategy. Is it something that you want to support? And in many cases with nonprofit, it needs to be, especially if you think about a volunteer connection. The second one is really around how do you secure the entirety of your assets? How do you secure the cloud assets that you have, anything that you have running on the internet, in the cloud? How do you secure anything that you have on premise? And then how do you think about devices? So this goes back to bring your own device plus any devices that you provide for your organization. And then the third one I'm going to bring up, because I think this is going to pivot to the business value discussion that we'll have. But this is about how do you think about the overall solution? How do you think about cost and completeness of solution based on budgets and cost sensitivity and the current environment we're in from an economic perspective. And so those are things you need to think about when you're looking at how do you best leverage technology in these areas. So one of the things I will say is that understanding how you protect, I mentioned this earlier, protecting the entirety of your organization and the way data and technology supports your organization. So there's three real vectors here. The first one is around securing devices. So we talked about that. How do you use multi-factor authentication and the proper cloud service security to really help make sure that you're not allowing individuals in who shouldn't be in. So devices is one thing. The second thing is access. And so many of you probably know this if you've spent any time with our cyber team at Eide, but the number one cause for ransomware and malware attacks is human being decision making. It has nothing to do with the software on the devices. It has to do with decisions people make about clicking on an attachment. And so how do you think about, if they make a poor decision on that attachment, how do you think about making sure you quarantine it, do the automatic checks of links? How do you make sure you're protecting on the endpoint and through the email the way you should? And then the last one's really around data. It's securing data, making sure that that new gold we talked about earlier is protected, that you make sure that you're doing everything you can to protect the information that you have, because at the end of the day, cyber criminals are really looking for that. And so again, from a solutioning perspective, from a what's happening in the market, the reality is less is more. And so having point solutions for data and for devices and for email protection becomes costly, and understanding how you consolidate that and do it at scale is really, really an interesting option. So from if you think about devices, cyber threats broadly, and attack surfaces, if you think about what's happening in your productivity suite, if you think about the need to access content remotely, whether that's through a PC or through a other mobile device, there are great solutions for that. Microsoft has Defender for Business. It is a comprehensive left-to-right solution, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about some of that in a few minutes. So there are other considerations when you look at technology options. And we'll spend some time on this because this one, particularly the first segment, is near and dear to my heart. And that's really around, is your organization ready? So the biggest cause of failure for any type of technology investment for an organization is not having the right strategy, plan, and internal support to make it happen. Number two is trying to do too much too fast. But thinking about, I would just net this out to three primary factors. Number one, do you have the time to commit, or what can you make the time to commit to actually work towards creating your digital future? Can you do it from from a time investment standpoint? And it's not just about picking one individual to go do the work, because that strategy also usually fails. It's about making it a portion of everybody's business within the organization for a period of time. And there are some really critical reasons for that, and I'll talk about it in the next bullet point, which is culture. If you are in an organization that is risk averse, that is change averse, and you're looking at new technology saying, well, that's interesting, but it's something we'll look at in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. That is something to consider as a leader or as an individual of influence in your organization to talk about, to raise the question. Because the reality is that culture and individuals in change management, which is the last point, those are the reasons that technology investments typically fail. It's not because the technology doesn't work or can't do what it was intended. It's really around the fact that the organization didn't embrace it and didn't do the right things to make it work. And so understanding your culture, understanding your readiness, and then potentially, doing some work to make that different going forward becomes a critically important piece of how you think about being successful. So is your organization ready with culture? And then the last piece is really around change management. And that ties to culture, but it's also an operational muscle, if you will. It's something you need to do to be prescriptive about, here's the timeline, here's the change that you're going to see, here's what it means to you, here's the benefit you get out of it, and then here's what you need to do to make that happen. And so there are great methodologies around change management. ProSci is a well-known methodology, but the truth of the matter is you have to have that in place, even in a lightweight way, in support of finding the time and making sure your culture will support what's changing. So that's the first bucket. Is your organization ready? And again, I would just reiterate, this is near the very top of the list in failed implementations that I've seen in my career. I think the second one is beginning with the end in mind. So anybody who's a Stephen Covey 7 Habits fan out there will recognize this one. The reality is that if you think about where you want to be in the future, if you think about where your organization needs to go, that's the first start. Think big, dream about what's the art of the possible. Think about that. That doesn't mean you're going to accomplish that in 16 months or 24 months or a certain time bound way, but it allows you to sort of create a true north for your organization. And then part of that needs to be, how do you apply technology to make that a reality? And it doesn't need to be specifics. It doesn't need to be about licensing and making sure that you've got all of the right tools and capabilities available, because the reality is those change every month in today's cloud-based world. But understanding as an organization what outcomes you want and where you want to go becomes a really powerful tool for your organization. And then the other piece of this, which is not listed on here, but I would say beginning with the end in mind, is come up with that strategy, make it an inclusive conversation across your organization, and then share it broadly. Share it broadly within your organization and share it broadly outside your organization. And that's really around the outcomes and impact that you want to see versus how. It's the what, not the how. And then the last piece that we're going to pivot to shortly is around cost, because I am very aware of the challenges of today's environment, in terms of economics. How do you think about what your options are what discounts are available to you as a nonprofit organization, and they are plentiful. And then how do you take advantage of them? How do you think about that in the way that it has the greatest impact for your mission? And then the second piece of that is, do you already own the tools? Do you already have some of these things that we're talking about that would allow you to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to further your mission and to have the greatest impact? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John to talk a little bit about some of the programs that we have from the Microsoft technology for nonprofit organizations. So John, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And you're doing a great job, everyone. Jeff's doing a great job. Hopefully I can pick up from where he left off. So in my role, I work with our clients on the front line. I help them decide which programs are the best and most appropriate, and how to use those programs to make sure that not only you're choosing the right one, but also which one is best for you, and actually how to use it. So Microsoft has a tremendous number of nonprofit offers, and I think deciding which one is the best is tough. But one of the things is the most important thing to notice is the amount of offers that Microsoft is providing for nonprofits. There's a lot. This slide is very busy. I'm not going to go into each and every one. One of the things that you will notice are there's some limitations on some of them. Like the Microsoft Business Premium is free for up to 10 users. And then after that, it's $5.50 per month per user. You do get an Azure annual credit of $3,500 per 12 months. So if you haven't used that, you can use it now. And then there's also, Microsoft has developed a Microsoft Cloud for nonprofits. Microsoft has made some advancements in all their products that they offer. You can do Microsoft 365, Power Platform, Dynamics 365, and Azure, as well as LinkedIn, to help combine your technologies into one so that everything is talking to each other. And then the ads for social impact. That's one thing that was new when I was at Microsoft Tech for Social Impact, is that if you do, if you're eligible and you qualify, you can receive a nonprofit credit of $3,000 monthly for your ads. And then Account Guard is something that's very important. It's a free offering. It's a cybersecurity service that adds an extra layer of protection to the high risk and for organizations like yourself. There are some limitations on that, but there's only a few states that we have to worry about. One thing, overall is a lot of nonprofits, in my experience, didn't know about these offers. So that's one thing why I try to go out there and be a evangelist, to help nonprofits claim these. They're out there. Microsoft offers them. A majority of nonprofits, as you probably can know, don't realize it's there. The Azure annual credit, for example, only about 5% of nonprofits actually use that across the board. So it just tells you that there's still a lot of nonprofits out there that can utilize it and take advantage of it. Another thing that seems to be a barrier as well is you don't have the staff to not only find it, claim it, but also use it. How do you use it? And that's one thing at Eide Bailey we can help you do. We can help you decide which offer is best for your organization, depending on the size, how you're going to use it, and then actually teach your organization as well. A lot of things your IT staff is doing on premises is running your on-premise environment day to day. Sometimes they don't have the opportunity to go and do all the things that are listed on here, what Eide Bailey can do. And that's something that we can help you guys do. And then on the next slide, it goes into the actual Microsoft 365 suites that are offered. As you can see, there's different sizes for different organizations. We have just the Business Basic, which has a few offerings. It's free up to 300 users. Business Standards has more offerings. It's for $3 per user per month. And then the one that we really try to talk to our nonprofits about is Microsoft 365 Business Premium, or you might hear us say M365 Business Premium. You get up to 10 licenses for free, and then it's $5.50 per license per user after that. Now, one of the things about Business Premium, it does have a cap of 300 users. If you have greater than 300 users or licenses needed, then we can talk about using the Microsoft 365 Enterprise 3. That's where we tend to see a lot of our larger nonprofit organizations set up their agreements with, is M365 E3. If you wanted to mix and match as well between them, if you have users who you may think need the M365 E3 offering, you can go ahead and assign them those licenses. If you have people that need M365 Business Premium, and we can help you determine that, we can do that as well. So it isn't an all or none type of situation. It is, hey, what makes the most sense for you and your organization, and how do we do that, and what makes the most sense? So if we go to the next one, Jeff, I'll go ahead and talk about the value. So if you look at simplifying your technology investment, you can see on the left-hand side all of the different offerings you can pay for, which is about a little bit more than $45 per month if you're looking at all the third party. Or would you rather just get a Microsoft 365 Business Premium subscription, which is $22 per month? It is up to 300 users, but it makes more fiscal sense.
Yeah. Well, in the case of this audience, John, it's actually $5.
Oh, it's $5. Great.
Per month, right?
Yeah. So that's one thing to point out as well. So yeah, if you guys are interested, we definitely want to help people out. I'd be happy to help answer any questions. Some questions have been put in questions and answers. Hopefully I've answered those. We'd love to talk to you guys. Please let us know what we can do for you. Thank you, Jeff.
Excellent. Thanks, John. So I think that, at the end of the day, this kind of concludes the conversation around trends and capabilities and things that we are seeing. We'll open it up for questions, but I think the last thing I would just point out is we know that that technology supporting nonprofits is really important. We also know that it needs to be affordable, and it needs to be something that makes sense for you on your timeline. So hopefully this conversation was useful to you. And at this point, we'll pause here and open it up for any questions that you might have.
While they're thinking of their questions, Jeff and John, anything that you would like to add?
Well, I guess the one thing I would add, and again, I've spent a lot of time on this during this conversation, but understanding your current technology security posture and how you're thinking about it broadly across everybody who accesses your network or comes in, then I think that that's something you absolutely need to be considering. And I see Erica asked a question around higher ed clients using Power Platforms. So one thing I would say, Erica, is we're actually working with the North Dakota State University system now, and how we put together a comprehensive Power Platform training for them for all of the 13 universities, major universities in the state. And so they have ideas. We're excited to hear what they are. But the reality is that that it's a powerful tool. It's actually relatively simple to use for some of the capabilities, but it's also something that requires some governance. One specific example I would give you is really around RPA and UI automation. And so we had an organization, we had a higher ed organization that leveraged some of the RPA work to basically stop replicating Excel spreadsheets into legacy application. And I don't have the specific metrics on the number of hours per week it saved, but it was substantial. It was substantive, and it was very well received by that organization. So I'd say robotic process automation on Power Platform is one for sure, and that's really sort of the lowest bar on that capability. So hopefully that helped. So if you do have, I think John already did his, but if you do have questions, follow-ups, things that we didn't cover today that you're interested in, it's jhensel@eidebailey.com. Thanks to everyone for the opportunity to share.
Yes. Go ahead, John.
I just have one thing to say. Everyone, I helped start the Tech for Social Impact organization back in 2018. I have a lot of experience helping small nonprofits as well as enterprise-sized nonprofits. I would be happy to have a conversation in terms of what you're trying to do and how to get there. Again, I felt like when I was at Microsoft, I was limited to just helping people with their Azure journey. With Eide Bailey, we have enough staff here, we have the technical resources, and myself, I can speak to whatever you're trying to do and how to get there in terms of Microsoft, or even agnostic in terms of if Microsoft isn't the right technology that you're looking for, what is the right technology and how do we help you get to where you want to be? Saving money and having a greater impact is what you're trying to do as a nonprofit. And the people that you serve are your customers and your clients. And in our situation, you're our clients. So in some situation, we're going to have an impact on those people as well. So thank you.
We just thank you all so much for attending. Thank you to our awesome presenters, Jeff and John. And we're going to give everyone a few minutes back in their day. Have a great rest of your day, and we will see you soon.